So, hello everyone, welcome to another session of Smart Talks. We are very privileged today to have Sédrik Vólldburgere joining us. Cédric is a very interesting person. He started his first company when he was 14, and since then he has invested in many startups, and now all his money he invested in Tomahawk.VC, which is a venture capital, and through that venture capital he is funding the startups in different fields. But it's not the investment part that makes Cédric interesting. He is a minimalist. He has only 64 things and lives with only those things. And also he is an essentialist, which means in every aspect of his life, he tries to promote productivity and be very productive. But what is very generous from Cédric is that he shares his knowledge and experience freely with everyone. He has a blog on YouTube and on other social media channels where he shares his experience. So I would ask everyone to go to YouTube and subscribe to his channel. Personally, I learn a lot from Cédric, starting from entrepreneurship to how startups work and how to manage a team. So you will benefit a lot from it. So with that, Cédric, you can start. One more question, and sorry, Cédric, if you have questions, please leave them in a chat. I will moderate that part. Also, there are no off-grid questions. Feel free to ask any kind of questions. This is an informal meeting, so make sure to get the most out of it. Thank you, Cédric. Now you have the meeting.
Thanks for the kind intro, Sam. And hi, everyone. Great to be here. Thank you all for your time. I've had the pleasure to come to Armenia twice in the last 4 or 5 years. The last time Sam hosted me, and I've had a great experience. We did explore the city as well as some of the countryside. So it's a pleasure to be connected again. I'll jump right in. I'll share some slides to go through maybe 20-25 minutes of a presentation, but the goal of this would be that it becomes interactive. It should be so that it creates a lot of value for you. So if there's any questions that come up, as Sam mentioned, just put them in the chat. And I've also created some slides where we can be a bit more interactive and collect some thoughts from you. All right, so let me try and start my, I think you need to allow me to share my screen, Sam. It says host disabled attendee screen sharing.
Sorry, can you try again? It should be available now.
Yes, perfect. Okay, my screen should be up and I'm gonna go into the presentation. So yeah, those are the 64 things the personal items that I lived with for a certain amount of time, and we'll dive into that a bit more, but it all starts with a big weakness that I have. And the weakness that I have is one for simple questions that don't have simple answers. So every now and then in life, I come across a question that just captures my brain, my mind for a number of months. And even though the question might look super simple and easy to answer at first, kind of innocent, sometimes they do capture my attention for quite a while. And among other things, what that has led me to in the past few years is, for one, I've given up on having a home for quite a while. I've lived homeless, so to say, for about 3.5 years. I've reduced everything that I have to just what fits into this bag. And it was 64 things at the time when I left my home. And then I also traveled an almost insane amount of times per year for a few years. If you look at this on a map, this is how my 2017 looked, all my trips. And this is not even showing every flight, it's just showing every route. So in total, it was about 120 flights that I went on that year, meaning less than 3 nights in a row in the same place on average. And I think I spent, I don't have the exact number off the top of my head right now, but I think I spent more than 20 days just on airplanes that year. Now, a lot of that was not very fun, to be honest. Constantly being at airports, being in security lines and sitting in airplanes all the time where there's lots of germs and constantly dealing with jet lag. That was not so fun, but it brought me to the places where I wanted to be, and I'll talk more about that later. And then the other thing that I realized what was really nice about this is that I covered almost 80% of the distance between Earth and Moon in that year. And as a kid, I always wanted to become an astronaut. So I felt in one way I did come a bit closer to that goal. So you might ask why go through so much travel and why give up on owning a home? And it starts with this question: what is it that makes me happy? And I'm sure all of you have probably come across this question. It's one of those questions to me that seems so simple, so innocent. And I was asking that question when I was in my first job ever. So I had started my company when I was 14, and I'll give you a bit more background on that later. But when I was 24, I did take a job in a corporate environment. I went to London and I worked in an investment bank. I took a project for, I think it was 6 months that I signed for. And I immediately knew that that was not the culture and the environment in which I was going to grow and flourish. After about 90 minutes after starting the job, it was a Monday in March, I knew that I had to get out of there as quickly as possible. And the reason was not that the people next to me weren't smart or intelligent or weren't driven to do a good job, but that they, at least from what I could observe, they kept chasing after a goal, which was to accumulate as much resources as possible without ever asking themselves, what is it that actually makes them happy? And so I was sitting there on my desk and I was making plans for how to get out of this environment within the next few months. I ended up leaving the project after 4 months, or finishing in the project after 4 months, so I could leave a bit earlier. And that question stuck with me because, of course, there's lots of things at first sight that will make you happy, right? Going out for drinks with friends, sports, driving a nice car, buying something. All of those things might give you happiness at first sight. But then I was really interested in not just happiness, but joy, like something that would allow me to go to bed happy and get up happy the next morning. And even after an excruciating day, a hard day, lots of challenges thrown my way, I still wanted to work on something that made me go to bed happy that day. And what I've learned for me is that there's really one component that was the main driver for my happiness and joy, which was learning about how the world works, how people work together, processes and systems that make all of us more productive, happier, and allow us to reach really, really big goals. So specifically, learning about how to go from an idea and grow it into something that becomes sustainable is something that I want to become really good at in my life, just because I feel as a small kid, I was always interested in solving riddles. I still am, and in a sense, working on startups and growing ideas into projects, into sustainable companies is kind of like a real life riddle every single time I go through it, because I realize that every time the journey is different. I can read as many books and listen to as many podcasts as I want, but every time we start a new company, we are presented with its whole unique set of problems. Sam mentioned it earlier. For me, I was fortunate. I was able to dabble in this experience for the first time when I was still pretty young. When I was 14, I started a company called MediaSign, which was an ad agency. And back then it started more as a hobby that turned into a project. I had always been fascinated by computers and machines. I had learned to code very early on in my life when I was 5 or 6 years old. And then when I was about 13 or 14, a friend and I, who I knew from Boy Scouts, we sat down together on the weekend. This was 2001, so right at the height of the dot-com bubble. And we started building websites, first for our Boy Scouts group and then for friends and family. And soon we had other people ask us if we could not build websites for them. And that's how that first business started. In the end, we ended up hiring photographers, designers, audio people, video people, and so on and so forth. And we had grown it to a pretty reasonable size. I was with the business full time for the first few years until my learning curve kind of flattened, and I'll speak a bit more about that later as well. But we ended up selling the business only about 2 years ago, after I think 11 or 12 years after officially making it a company in 2007. And so to give you a bit of an overview of my journey, the companies that I was lucky to be part of and have an impact on. As I mentioned, like MediaSign was started in Switzerland. And then I went on and I kind of caught that startup bug. So I wanted to see what's next. And I went to New York and started working on a company called A Small World. Small World was a social network that was around before Facebook. Luckily for unluckily for the founders, they built it on the premise that in order to be valuable, the network had to remain small. So you could only get in if you had at least 2 or 3 other people refer you, invite you to the network. And so Facebook quickly overtook them. But nevertheless, it was very interesting to see and be part of a company that had that early vision of how connected the world would soon become through the Web 2.0. I then went to Berlin and I worked on a company called SumUp. Some of you might have heard of a company called Square or Stripe in the US. They're companies that work in the payment sector that make it easier for both small and larger merchants to accept payments and pay their suppliers. And SumUp is the equivalent of Square for Europe. Then at the same time, I was studying electrical engineering in Zurich and then later on in Hong Kong. And while I was in Hong Kong, I started an online tailor, which was a business where you could go online and put in your measurements and you would get custom-made shirts and suits like this one through a website. So we built it in China with production in Thailand as well, but then we were mostly selling to Europe. So it's kind of an arbitrage business where we used high quality at a lower price in Asia to fulfill the needs of our customers in Europe. And then last but not least, that led me to my experience at the investment bank that I was just talking about. After the investment bank and after realizing that I definitely have to be in the early stages of a company, that's where I'm going to flourish and that's where I will get a lot of energy day in, day out from just being in love with my work, I decided to go all in on startups and this learning process. And so instead of going one after the other and building a company myself and seeing whether it would succeed or not, and then trying the next one, I decided to try and parallelize that process. I figured if I can learn from not just one company, but ideally 5 or 10 companies at the same time, I would profit even more. And so one way in order to work on 10 different companies at the same time is to become an investor. Luckily at the time, from some of my earlier ventures, they had provided me with a bit of extra cash flow. And at the same time, I had a couple of friends that thought what I was working on was really clever and they trusted my knowledge to invest their money as well into what would hopefully become very successful companies one day. And so that's when I started a company called Tenderloin Ventures, which is basically a vehicle that we use to do angel investments. And we did those mostly in Berlin, which at the time was still emerging as a startup capital of Europe, and then also some companies in Switzerland. After about 2.5 years, so this is early 2014 until mid 2016, I was working in parallel on all those 10 different companies, not operational, but still as a very engaged and active investor. And I spent a lot of time thinking about strategy and talking about options and opportunities with the founders, but sometimes also diving really deep and working with them on the website or on their product or their sales strategy. But then after about 2.5 or 3 years, I realized that my learning curve was just not as steep anymore. And the itch became too big and I wanted to jump back into an actual venture and start something where I could be in the driver's seat as well. And so I ended up co-founding 3 companies. One is Glimpse in Miami. Glimpse is a company that uses computer vision to give bars and restaurants analytics similar to what Google Analytics gives website operators. So we will place cameras in a bar that capture, for example, the bar area and automatically count how many drinks are given out over the counter, and then match that to the POS system. So we could give bar owners a good idea of how long does it take to serve a drink, how many drinks are served within the required time, and then also how many drinks are given out for free because they're forgotten to be rung up or they're just given out as gifts, and so on. The second company that I started is a company called SendTask. SendTask is similar to a lot of the task managers and project management software that you've probably used with a twist. So you might have used something like Trello or Asana or Wunderlist or many of these other great to-do managers. And I'm a big fan of all of those, but one problem that I've realized with all of them is that they're built for internal communication. So they're great to work with your coworkers and colleagues, but they're not really good at spontaneous collaboration. What I mean by that is sometimes let's say the two of us or all of us might have some takeaways from this conversation. And instead of me sending out an email to all of you and saying, hey, send me this and this feedback until next Monday, that's an actionable item. So I should instead be able to just send you a task that does that. Now, the problem with Asana and all the existing competitors is that I would first need you to sign up. You would have to understand how I'm using the software. So there's a pretty steep ramp up phase for us to start collaborating efficiently. So with SendTask, you can send tasks to anyone as long as you know their email address. If you go to sendtask.io, you can create tasks and you can immediately assign them to someone else. And that person can start to work with the task. They will receive it via email immediately without having to create an account or having to go through some sort of onboarding process where they first get to know the app. And then last but not least, the third company that I started in 2016 or co-started in 2016 is a company called Dfinity. Dfinity has invented new math that makes faster consensus possible. So if all that sounds like mumbo jumbo, to give you a bit of background, like this is in the cryptocurrency space, or this is in the blockchain space. So there's a new type of internet, which is all going to be completely decentralized, meaning we can run applications that are unstoppable, that cannot be governed by anyone, they cannot be changed. And there's a number of applications where that can be helpful. For example, if you think of governance applications, online voting, right now, we don't really have a good way to provide a completely unstoppable and transparent system to anyone. So Dfinity is working on that infrastructure. You might have heard of Ethereum. Ethereum currently allows you to run smart contracts or small apps, but a lot of that doesn't really scale. So the simplest analogy that we often use is when we think back of how the internet worked in 1992 or 1995, when we all used a modem to go online. Theoretically, we could have had YouTube or we could have had Zoom and this conversation, but in practice, it was just not possible because the line was just so limited that we could not have had this direct conversation at such a good quality, or we couldn't have had YouTube because it would have taken days to download even a 2 or 3 minute clip. So only when broadband internet became widely available, a lot of these applications actually became practically feasible. And I think the same shift is happening in the Web 2.0, this decentralized internet at the moment. And Dfinity is one of the infrastructures that's soon going to go live and provide us with more bandwidth in order to build these applications. So that's a bit of my entrepreneurial journey. I stopped working out in an operational role on these 3 projects about a year and a few months ago. And since then, I've been focusing 100% on Tomahawk.VC. And I'll get to what this is in a bit, in a few slides. So as you can probably guess from the map view that we just had, I've traveled quite a bit during those years. I've not only moved from Zurich to New York to Berlin to Hong Kong to back to New York and a few more stops. And at some point during my journey, I was confronted with another one of these seemingly very simple and innocent questions that just wouldn't get off my mind. And the question was, how many things do I actually own? Now, if you ask yourselves, it'd be interesting to hear, or like ask yourself and see if you can come up with a number. At the time, even though I had already moved so often and I had kind of packed everything that I owned into just 1 or 2 bags, when I moved from continent to continent, I still didn't have a good idea. I didn't know if it was 50 things that I owned or 500 or potentially even 1,000 things. I've later read a study that the average European person has about 10,000 things. And I think that that's probably valid for most of the world. And I knew I had less, but I didn't know how many things I actually owned. And so being trained as an engineer, after this question sat on my mind for probably like 2 or 3 months, I finally went to my apartment in Zurich. And what I did is I started a spreadsheet. And I went through my apartment and I started collecting every single thing that I owned and trying to keep count of it. And there were 2 things that I found interesting. Number one, at the end of the process, I did have a number. It was about 600 plus items that I owned at the time. And that's including all the furniture, all the cutlery, all the gadgets, all my clothing, and so on and so forth. But the other thing that I found extremely interesting about this was that it took me about 2 months to complete the list. Because what I realized is that there's so much stuff that I owned unconsciously. Like I had a few set of clothes at my parents' place, and then I had an extra credit card for this or that business. And it took me so long to accumulate all these items. And that's really got me thinking. Because I thought it was interesting that apparently in today's world, it's so easy to accumulate stuff. It's so much easier to accumulate stuff than to actually know how much stuff we have. And so that kind of bothered me, and it brought me on a journey. So this is how the list looked at the time. I took a list of what was it, who did I buy it from, which store, how many of what did I own. Then I also have some accessories, meaning my phone comes with a cable and it comes with a case. I was also wondering what category things fit in. And you see here that most of the stuff that I own is clothing, but a few of it is also tech and travel related stuff. I took a note of the color, and we'll get back to that as well. And I also asked myself, how much does this cost? Because I thought, at the time, I thought it would be interesting to know if I lost everything today, every physical item that I own, how much money would it take me to get to the exact same state? Because I always had this dream of being so free from stuff that I could just pack my things and live in Japan from tomorrow on, if that's what made the most sense for me and the people around me and the projects that I want to bring value to. And so knowing that only 10,000 Swiss francs is what's needed to replace every physical object that I currently own was kind of refreshing, because then I knew that basically with just a credit card and a passport, I could go anywhere and continue to live my life at the exact same standard, at least from the standard from the point of view of like the physical stuff. By the way, Sam mentioned my YouTube channel, and I just published an episode recently. I think it's going to go live actually later today, where I packed everything that I own currently into this bag when I came to Portugal on Monday. So my wife and I are currently in Portugal. We're usually based in Switzerland, and due to COVID, we've been based there for the past 4 or 5 months. But we went on our first flight a few days ago, and I filmed me packing all my stuff before we went to the airport. So I mentioned that I owned only 64 items when I left or when I gave up on having an apartment. And so here are some thoughts on how that happened. But first, I maybe want to quickly ask from you, what is the one thing, because I often get asked that question, what's the one thing you couldn't live without? If you had to give up everything except for one thing, what would be the one thing that you will keep? And feel free to either unmute yourself or just post in the chat, and I'll see if I can make the chat visible here as well. Seems I have to leave presentation mode for a moment to do that. I'll stop sharing for a moment and I'll go into the chat.
So we already have options. One of them is laptop.
Laptop. Who also thinks laptop would be the one item that they would keep if they had to give up everything? Phone, umbrella. Umbrella is an interesting one.
Me.
You think laptop would also be the last thing you would give up?
Actually, I use my phone, so I don't need laptop everywhere, just in the office. So umbrella for the sun because I have allergy. I'm allergic. And so for me, it's very important. When it's raining, when there is sun, I need umbrella always.
Yeah, interesting. Thanks for sharing that. So my answer would clearly be a pair of pants. Like, I think without clothing, that's definitely like, because if we cannot own anything, and I've gone through this experiment, at least mentally quite a few times, but also do survival training every now and then. And what I realize is that without clothing, it gets cold really quickly, and I am pretty miserable pretty soon after that. If I could only keep one or two items, it would probably be an overall, ideally, so I can cover my whole body, a pair of shoes, and then probably a knife. That would probably be the three things that I would keep. But of course, a lot of you interpret this question as assuming that we have everything that's kind of needed to survive. And then I would probably agree with all of you. I would also keep my phone because it allows me to both be productive as well as remain connected with the people that I love and value, and as well as the people that I work with. Okay, let me jump back into the presentation. So when I was going from 600 plus items to just 64, there's a few things that I learned that I want to share with you in case any one of you wants to go through the experiment. And one thing is what I call the 90-90 rule. What I realized the first time when I counted and I made that list and I realized I wanted to own less, it was very hard for me to let stuff go. I thought that maybe this t-shirt, I had worn it to a special occasion, and so I needed it to remind me of something, or my photo books, I felt like, okay, I mean, I cannot let go of them because I might one day want to come back to them. But also more mundane stuff, like I own, so nowadays I only own 2 pairs of pants, one short and one long. But at the time I probably owned like 4 or 5 pairs of pants. And so I invented the 90-90 rule. And what I would do is, like, every 90 days, every time after 90 days, at the end of the quarter, I would sit down, I would look at the list, and I would ask myself, which items on here have I not used in the past 90 days? And do I not 100% need in the next 90 days? And then those items, I would first put in a bag and put that in the corner as long as I still had a home. And then afterwards, I'll just put it in a bag and leave it at a friend's place or my parents' place. And what I realized is that, of course, I had never gone back to that bag a single time. So even though things would have been available and I could have always gone back and picked out that shirt or that photo book or that extra pair of pants, I realized once I had stowed it away, I didn't really need it anymore. And so that's really helped me to filter out which are the items that I really need in my life and which ones are the ones that I just keep dragging along with me in my backpack every single day. And it's also allowed me to figure out, or give it some perspective, because 90 days plus 90 days is half a year. It's 180 days. And that covers formal days, informal events. It covers days when I'm out hiking or by the beach. And it also covers days when I'm in the office. So chances are, if I'm not going to use this in 180 days, I will never use it again. And then what did I do with the items that I didn't need anymore? Of course, you could throw stuff away. That's always a possibility if it's just not good anymore, or something that's clearly so used that no one else can get value from it. Then on the other end of the spectrum, there's things like, for example, for a certain amount of time, I was really into tracking all my activities. So I was wearing not just the Fitbit, but also an Apple Watch and two more wristbands just to benchmark them all against each other. And of course, I didn't need 4 trackers for the long term. So after that testing period, 3 of them I just resold or gave them to friends as gifts. And then gifts, that leads me to the last option, which is actually the one that has impacted me the most, donating stuff. So at first I thought, oh, I cannot give this t-shirt away because I wore it at a special occasion, or I might eventually want to have a white t-shirt or a green t-shirt. But once I started giving things away and donating them, and my wife comes originally from Kazakhstan, and she still has friends there, and often when they come to visit, we are able to give clothing that we don't need anymore for them to distribute in Kazakhstan to a good cause. And that's actually been a really positive experience for me. I think just living in this, in an environment where I don't come from a rich background, but also in Switzerland, we never had to worry about being able to put food on the table or being, or having enough clothing to be dressed every day. Giving stuff away and knowing that it goes to someone that gets value from it instead of the clothing just sitting in my closet and collecting dust was a really positive experience. And so after a while, where before it was hard for me to give stuff away and I had to put it in a bag in a corner, it almost became an addiction. It became a very positive feedback loop where I wanted to give more away and I wanted to share more and I wanted to bring the items that I didn't immediately need to someone that would get value from them. And then also another learning that I've made over the years, once I've made it to just 64 items, it was actually not that easy to stay at just 64 items, because often we like to celebrate and we like to give gifts to one another. I know that personally from my trip to Yerevan twice, we all like to celebrate together and invite each other, not only for experiences, but we also like to gift one another for birthdays, anniversaries, Christmas, and lots of other reasons. And so it's actually kind of hard to stay at 64 items at the beginning. When for example, for Christmas, my mom would gift me new clothing, or she would give me like a gadget that I very honestly probably didn't really need. And so I thought about how to deal with that. And one sentence that has always very much resonated with me is presence is the best present. And what does it mean? It means instead of giving me something, give me your time. Let's spend time together. Let's create memories together. Let's really connect with one another. And that can be as simple as let's go for a walk together. Let's keep a Sunday reserved for one another and just spend it with something simple. Let's go on a hike. Let's go running together and eat together. Or it can be something like, let's go climb a mountain together, or let's go travel somewhere together. But let's create memories and let's share present with one another. Let's gift each other our time. And while it took a bit of time for everyone in my family and friends circle to adapt to it, that was probably one of the best decisions I've ever made, was to really stick to this principle, because it's led to so many unforgettable moments. And if you're looking, if you feel like maybe you haven't, making gifts is sometimes a stress for you, or it feels like something you feel obligated to do and you don't really know what to pick, or on the other side, you sometimes get gifts that you feel you don't really have that much use for, I would just challenge you to try this and bring it up with your friends and family to gift each other time and presence the next time they gift you something, or vice versa, because it's led to so many positive moments in my life that I can only recommend it. So after getting rid of a lot of the 600 items that I had at the beginning, consolidating a lot of them and figuring out, if I can only keep one kind of t-shirt, which one is it going to be? And if I can only keep one pair of shoes, which one is it going to be? I arrived at about 127 items, and I still had a place at the time. I had a flat outside Zurich. And all in all, I owned about 127 items. And then there it was again, a simple question that stuck in my mind. I was traveling back from New York to Zurich. I overnighted in Zurich, and the next morning I got up, I packed my things in order to head back to the airport to fly to Amsterdam. And that morning I got up and I realized that if I was honest with myself, I probably only flew back to Zurich because I felt that if I was already paying for an apartment, I might as well use it a few nights per month at least. And that morning it dawned on me that that cannot be, I don't want to be controlled by the things. I want to be controlled, or I want to spend my energy on the people I value and the projects that I value, but I do not want things to take time from me, because in all honesty, it probably added cost that I didn't fly to Amsterdam directly, and it added probably an additional at least 5-6 hours of travel time. And I wasn't relaxed. I didn't get much of a benefit except for I felt I maintained that apartment. And so that morning I made the decision to not follow that mindset anymore. And I decided to go homeless. That morning I posted on social media that from now on I was going to live without having a constant home, that I would be grateful for any friends that would allow me to sleep on their couch or their guest bed whenever I get stranded in their city. And I texted my landlord and said, I don't need the flat anymore. And less than 30 days later, I have found someone else that moved in, and I was down to the 64 things on my back. So for those that watch closely, if you look at this list, you might see that the color of all my items it's almost all black, except for 2 Swiss passports that I own that unfortunately are only available in red. So my question to you is, what reasons could have led me to keep only or own only black things? I think it's easiest if you just unmute and just say whatever you think. There's no bad answers.
I can see Gor raised hand. Gor, do you want to say something?
I want to say that I think that it's connected with co-op psychology, and I think that there is no need to explain what means black. It means, for me, it means that you watch everything and you can collect every information which you watched and analyze it. And for example, black and red colors men use for being attractive, and I know many things connected with this. It's I've used to talk about this, but I think that there's no time for this now.
Thank you, Gor. And we have another person. Your name is iPhone, but you can speak.
First, I would like to understand what was the question, because sometimes the connection is just going and coming back. Oh. Sorry. Actually, I'm Anna, but I don't know. I just use Zoom only with a link, so I never put my name. This is the reason.
Cool. And so yeah, just to quickly repeat the question, like if in case you can see my screen, there's a list of things that I own, and one thing you'll notice is that almost everything that I own, except for 2 items, which are my passports, everything is black. And I was just wondering, there's a few reasons why that is, but I'm just wondering if you had any ideas why everything that I own is black.
In my opinion, at the moment, the things you have, but one day can happen, you lose, or you forget, or you don't give importance to these items. And as I have understood, you said about your passports, right? The red.
Yes, the passports are red. Yes, everything else is black.
Yeah. But, yeah. Or the information you can put in your email and have only your phone and just enjoy your life without other things that you put black. Or maybe the black can also be that you had them, they are important at the moment. In the future, maybe you still don't know. You will need them or not.
Thank you, Anna. We have two more options. So Elena Simchuk says it's more practical. Silva Ivazian says black things get dirty later. And Samuel Alexanian says black is being intellectual. And we have Robert Khachatyan, he raised hand. Do you want to say something?
Well, I guess I support all the options because black is a practical color that matches with all styles, be it like a formal, informal, casual one. It can also bring some elegance in terms of your diplomas, in terms of your meetings. Or this is just your option to create some kind of intriguing information. But I guess black is something that is very easy to wash, to maintain, and even to iron.
Yeah, all great reasons. Thank you guys all for your inputs. You mentioned a lot of the reasons why I made the decision. Among them, you can wear black to almost any occasion. Sometimes what happens to me is if I'm dressed like this and I go to an event, I get asked if I could bring an extra beer for someone because they mistake me for the waiter. But other than that, I rarely run into any issues. And of course, I'm happy to get people beer. Another reason is that aside from the things that take time from me that need to be maintained, I also try to reduce the amount of decisions that are not valuable to my well-being or to my vision of life. And for example, to me, it's not that important whether I have a red shirt or a blue shirt. So typically black is something that is available by default. If I'm getting a new iPhone or if I'm getting I don't know, a bag, usually there's a black version available. So that's one decision that I save every time. Also, given that everything's black, everything goes with each other. So I never need to worry about what I'm wearing that day, which is also helpful for me because I'm not known for having a really good color style. So before wearing black, I would often hear from my now wife, then girlfriend, that I was really not talented at picking clothes out and matching colors. So that's something that I solved with just wearing black. And then there's a very pragmatic reason as well. Given that how much I traveled and I would often stay at Airbnbs or hotels, often the bedding, the sheets on the bed would be white. And because I pack almost every single day, it's much harder to forget a black shirt laying on a white bedding sheet rather than a white shirt. So it's helped me never forget anything with all the travel that I've done. And then of course, someone mentioned that it also doesn't get as dirty quickly or dirty as quickly, which I've often been corrected. It does get dirty as quickly. It just doesn't show as quickly is what some females in my life have made a point of telling me very, very often. All right, so let's jump from this personal lifestyle of not owning anything and being homeless to how can we translate this into a company? And since I've been always fascinated of like, what are the processes that we can create and the systems that we can create in order to make startups and ideas flourish, I thought about, hey, this lifestyle has made me really happy. It's made me free from anything that I felt like I had to maintain. So maybe we should try and apply it in a company as well. And so we did that experiment with a company called Zendesk that I mentioned earlier. The company that builds this productivity software where you can share tasks with just anyone. And so maybe first I want to start out with a quick question to all of you is, again, I know some of you are in university, some of you have either had a job or are working now. What do you think will be the biggest upsides and downsides of having an office versus having no office at all? And again, feel free to just unmute yourself and speak.
I think that it depends on which kind of office it is. And for example, now I have a startup and I need an office or a room, for example, because I need it for my content marketing and target marketing, for example, for shorts or videos or something like this.
I see. Yes, I would totally agree. There's some businesses that are harder to run remotely. I think the most extreme example would be if we're building a car, right? Then we need a factory. We need a place where we can put the car together. What would be some obvious downsides of not having an office in, let's say, a company like Centask that just builds software, where you, like in theory, everyone can work remotely?
If it's an, for example, software development, some guys can join and do work, for example, on freelancer.com or the other sites. And for them, there is no need to have some office where they can do some marketing. It's my thoughts. It can be not for you in this way. But for example, if I want to sell T-shirts with a great idea for me, I need some room because it must help me to do content marketing.
I see. Yep. So great inputs. Thank you so much. Yep.
I start?
Yes, go ahead.
For example, I'm working in tourism. I'm running information center and for 13 years. And for sure you need office because tourists are coming, you give information, etc. I have a business idea that for 8 years I'm doing, and now I want to make a small business. And it's like producing alcohol drinks, like homemade spirits and liqueurs. And in my opinion, for now, I haven't needed like a space. I use my home area. The most important thing is like how you do your marketing to sell it. So maybe online, but what about the space? For sure, for certain businesses, you have to be in your space. For example, for IT technologies, for developing like, I don't know, iPhone program or something, I don't know. So for it, it's not necessary to have a space. You can do, I would like to differentiate two types of businesses. So if you, so there are businesses that can be flexible. You can move from one place to the other. Like my friend was working here from New York, and their company, they from New York, and so she could move to New York and work there. It's not necessary to carry, I don't know, furniture or the product. So for IT companies, it's very easy to move the space, and for companies like producing, etc. If I produce, I don't know, 5,000 bottles, I cannot carry everywhere every time. Maybe this is the difference, but of course you need. Yes.
Great inputs from all of you. One thing that strikes out is that all of you, I think, are already used to connecting online and sharing online and meeting each other online. And especially COVID this year has enforced it for all of us. But when we started out, the biggest negative that we saw was it's hard to build a company culture. It's hard to feel as a team. It's hard to have a common goal if you're not in the same office. And so that's the main challenge, and I'll go into how we dealt with that in just a moment. But as many of you saw, or as a couple of you mentioned, and I'm sure more of you thought of this as well, it has many benefits, right? As long as it's a business that needs nothing but electricity and Wi-Fi, your workspace can look different every single day. You can be traveling and you can be as efficient anywhere in the world. Another big benefit that it had for me as the founder and CEO of this company is that it allowed me to focus on what I think is really important versus what's urgent. And to give you a bit of background, what I mean by that is if we start a company and we base it off one single place, once we hire someone new, I'm constantly absorbed because that person runs over and says, hey, can you help me solve this? And how do we do this? And what's the process to get to this point? And so I would constantly be distracted, or if not me, someone else in my team. And with us being separated and remote, that's not as easily possible, right? You might be able to call me, but even then it's not we cannot collaborate as easily. So what that meant for us is that we had to invest a lot of time and energy at the beginning into documenting everything, to be very clear about our vision, but also simple things like how do we do expenses and how do we do invoicing and stuff like that. But because we had to document all of this much earlier, it then allowed us to grow much quicker. After the first 5-6 employees, we had a pretty complete catalog of questions and answers. And so for every additional employee that joined, it was a much smoother process. And then last but not least, it really allowed me to focus in my role as CEO on two things. Number one, I'm the pilot of this company. I'm making sure we're going the right direction and we're traveling at the right altitude. But I'm really just giving guidelines. And the second point is I help make the job of everyone in the company as easy as possible. Because I've hired smart people for product, for design, for marketing, for admin stuff. So my job now is not to take over marketing or product, but my job is to provide an environment and tools within which all my employees can be as productive as possible. And so in a sense, this company was the first company where I felt I could be the truest CEO possible compared to others where it was so easy for me to jump into product or jump into marketing because people were sitting right next to me. But then company culture, how do we build company culture? How do we make sure that we not only connect with one another as coworkers, but we connect with one another as human beings? It's very easy to see on the screen on the left, and this is how we usually work for 90 days at a time. It's very easy to see your coworkers, and it's very easy to have a Slack name and to send a development job to the developer and a marketing job to the marketing person. But then if you're creating something new, if you're creating a new company, if you want to change the world, you need much more than that. You cannot rely on just coworkers. You need to understand the human beings you are sitting in a boat with and the human beings that help you bring this idea off the ground. And I think that's only possible if you create experiences together, if you get to know each other. And so what we did is every 90 days, we would come together for a week. We will fly people to one and the same location. And then we will focus our time on two things. Number one, in the mornings, we would work on the long-term strategy. We would make sure that the roadmap for the next 90 days is very clear and everyone is aligned. So that once we do separate again, everyone can go back to their individual places and they more or less know what they're going to be doing the next 90 days. But then the other half of the day, we focused on getting to know each other. And that meant creating experiences together. And sometimes it was as simple as having lunch together or going for a walk. At the very bottom there, we're actually in the in Zurich on a hike. And then in the top right corner, sometimes it was also a bit more extreme or a bit more lasting of a memory. That day, I told the whole team that we were going to go have a picnic, and we went surprise skydiving. So I took a little van. Everyone got in and we drove to the airport. And that's when I revealed that we were going to jump out of a plane half an hour later. And of course it was, let's say I've learned a lot that day as well, mainly that not everyone likes extreme surprises as much as I do. But it was definitely something that was lasting for everyone. And just to close that chapter, I think what it comes down to is this word company. We say company to a project, to something that, to the legal entity. But I think I like the word, but I think it's often misused because I think what makes a startup work, what makes an idea get off the ground is in the end the company you're building it with. And it all stands and falls with the people you're doing this with. And so people are really the main asset and the only thing that a startup has at the beginning. So jumping back into my personal life, remember how my journey kind of started with the question, what is it that makes me happy? A couple of years after, I asked myself, what is it that makes me unhappy? Because if that question, what is it that makes me happy, has brought so many good changes in my life, maybe it's time to also ask the inverse of it and ask myself, what is it that makes me unhappy? And I realized that it's often March, the third month in the year. You might ask why March? And it has to do with New Year and New Year's resolutions. What I realized was that January 1st, I was usually ready for the new year and I felt like I had left my backpack all of the experiences and the baggage of the last year passed and behind me, and I was ready to attack the new year. And I would set lots of goals. I would say I'm going to learn a new language and start 2 new companies, and I was going to go to the gym every day, and I would only eat keto, and I would be a better friend, and lots of goals. And I wrote them down, and I set targets, and I was very good at it in January. January, I hit my goals every single day. And in February, I hit them every second day or maybe every third day. But I was getting kind of tired because also work had picked up, and it was getting intense, and I had so many side goals. And then March, I was usually miserable because I realized I was never going to succeed. I also realized that I had another 9 months to go, but my view of life had a bit shifted and turned. So I was not able to stick to my gym routine. And if I'm not able to stick to it every single day, I might as well not do it. And so it made me unhappy. So I thought about what can I do in order to use that positive energy that I had felt on January 1st and turn it into an experience that is positive and allows me to make changes. And what I've realized is that I need a 90-day year. So instead of seeing the year as 365 days, I need to break it down to smaller periods. Why is that? Well, for one, I realized that 90 days I can feel. I have an emotional connection to where I'm going to be 90 days from now. I can pretty much tell where I'm going to be 90 days from now and what I'm going to be working on. But a year is a different story. In a year, I might be living in a different country. I might be working on a different project with a different team and so on. Yet 90 days is long enough to make impact in one area. So if I work out for 90 days at a time, I'm going to get really, really fit. If I watch my diet for 90 days, I'm going to be really, really disciplined and become very healthy through that. And then also, if I really want to learn a lot more about rocket science, if I read about it for 90 days straight, I'm going to learn a lot about rocket science. And so the way I structured this is by sending myself an email. So SendTask has this service where I can create a task from an email. And so by sending it to March 31st, and I would do this at the beginning of the year, it would then create a task that would remind me on March 31st with that email. And in this email, I would write about 2 things, a review and a preview. In the review, I will cover the last 90 days, and in the preview, I will cover the next 90 days and kind of write to my future self. So what do I write about? In the review, I go through 12 areas of my life. Why 12 areas? Well, I just sat down one day and I asked myself, if I had to explain my life in terms of areas to someone, which ones would those be? And those are the ones that I came up with at the time. I might change them over time. Some might become more important than others. But in essence, like I just try to create buckets in my life. It's like, so I go in and I start writing about these. And to give you an example, here's the area of friends. And I have a list of questions that I ask myself. And the first one is always, how do I feel? Because I've realized that in life, even though I like to think that I have a capable brain and I'm able to solve complex problems, what I've realized is that my gut and my heart usually know how to solve complex challenges much, much quicker and better than my brain does. And so over the years, I've learned to be more in tune with my feelings and my emotions. And that's the first thing that I write about. Do I feel like I've been a great friend? Do I feel very content, or do I feel do I feel like I have not been there for my friends, or someone of my friends hasn't been there for me when I needed them? And then I have a number of more questions that allow me to drill down and go deeper. And the goal of this is to really point out where in my life do I need the most improvement? Where am I the most off track in terms of my path and journey of life? And then what I do is I send this email, and 90 days later, I get it back. But before I get it back, I also write about a preview. And in the preview, what I do is I write about what is the one thing that I want to change. So after writing about these 12 areas, where do I feel I need the most change? And one quarter, it could be that I need the most change in a certain business. Another, it could be I want to become a better friend. And the third one, it might be I want to get fitter. But the important thing is that I'm only working on one thing concurrently. So I only allow myself to be focused on one improvement at a time. And then I figured out what is it for this time, and I do visualize it, meaning I think about the next 90 days, how am I going to work on this very concretely? If it's about going to the gym, when am I going to go to the gym? Which gym am I going to? When I'm traveling, what do I do instead of going to the gym? And so on and so forth. And so one impact that came out of one of these quarterly reviews for me about 1.5 years ago was that I wanted more focus in my life. I have been working in several companies. I have been wearing multiple hats for a very long time. And even though it was fun being involved in different projects at the same time, it was also stressful because I realized that I'm never going to be world class in one area if I distract myself with multiple projects at the same time. And at the same time, I realized that I do not want to work on just one company. Being in just one company, I think there's people that are much better at this, but for me, it's all about the big decisions, about bringing the initial team together, creating the initial product, getting the initial sales going. And it's not so much about growing the company from 5 people to 50 and from 50 to 500. And so I thought a lot about what is it that I can be really good at and still be very happy at. And I realized that being an investor is a great role for me because it allows me to constantly shift from high-level topics to very deep topics and operational topics, and even do that across multiple companies. And that's just a stimulation that I really value, and something that I'm also really good at, creating synergies between different companies, bringing my network together to solve a problem. And that's when I decided to leave my role at the companies that I mentioned and start Tomahawk.VC. And Tomahawk.VC is a very small team. It's Claude, who works with me, and we officially launched earlier this year, but we started working on it about a year ago. And we do invest 20 million Swiss francs, which is mostly my money plus money of a few friends right now, into early stage startups. To be a bit more precise, we invest in technology startups, meaning mostly software businesses that lend themselves to scaling very quickly, and also to a culture where everyone can participate, all kind of talent can participate from all over the world. So not like a car company where we need a factory. In a bit more detail, we do invest in a pre-seed, seed, and Series A stage. And then we invest in founders with a global first mindset. And to talk a bit more about that, global first, I would say, is the mindset of going global much sooner than what feels comfortable. And that could mean founders that are willing to approach a second and a third market long before they try to perfect their first market. To give you an example, often startups in Switzerland try to become really good at the Swiss market. We have 4 national languages plus English. It's 5 different languages, but we're only 8 million people. So that's kind of hard, or it takes a long time to just serve 8 million people. Whereas if you were to go to the UK or Germany or the US much sooner, you could get access to at least 10 times larger markets, sometimes like 30 times larger, without having to first perfect 5 different languages. So that's what it could mean on the sales side, but it could also mean on the team side that it's founders that do not only work with in-office employees. They create a culture from the beginning that works both for people in the office as well as remote employees. And why do I feel strongly about that? Because I think there's so much great talent all around the world that it would be silly nowadays to restrict myself to only hire people from Berlin or Zurich or even New York or San Francisco, are very small markets compared to the whole world. And the cost of working together efficiently over a long distance have just become so small nowadays that it's something that I feel founders need to see very early on in their company's lifetime. So why would a founder take money from Tomahawk.VC? What do we do differently? There's lots of investors, maybe not so many in Switzerland, a few more if you look at the German-speaking room, but we invest globally. That means we would also invest in a company in San Francisco or one in Armenia. And why would founders take money from us? It comes kind of back to a lot of points, but one of them of course, is me sitting on the other side. I think investing together or allowing an investor to come on board and invest in your company is a lot like marriage. Because you're going to be together for a very long time. You're going to go through a roller coaster of emotions together. You're going to have to figure out a lot of difficult situations and challenges together. And so it's important that you feel you have a personal match with the person that you allow to invest in your company, and vice versa for me. And I think what we bring to the table, aside from being able to intro you to a lot of investors and product market knowledge and giving you insights into how to best structure your recruiting process, in the end, it's this mindset that I've also applied in my personal life. It's this, let's be very consequent with one another. Let's focus on what's really important and get rid of everything else. And then also, let's try and focus on the one thing that we need to do one step at a time and keep everything else for later. Because the number one thing where I see early stage companies fail is being too opportunistic, trying to do too many things at the same time, and as a consequence, not advancing on one single initiative quickly enough. And with that, I want to finish with a quote that I really like. The secret of happiness, you see, is not found in seeking more, but in developing the capacity to enjoy less. Because I think it's often easy for us to think that minimalism has only become possible since we all have a phone in our pocket that allows us to call a car or to book a bed for the night over Airbnb or booking.com. But the idea of keeping it simple and sticking to the things that are really important and letting everything else away is something that's very old. In fact, Socrates said this more than 2,500 years ago. And that's one thing that always fascinates me, how often and how long this idea has been in our mind. But I feel it's still more relevant today than it has ever been. And with that, thank you guys so much for watching the presentation, following me along and giving your inputs. I'll stop the screen sharing in a moment, but here you see again the YouTube channel. If you're interested in more ideas, please head over there and subscribe. And with that, I'll stop the screen share and we'll open it up, Sam.
Yeah, so we went over time. Do we have any minutes left to take any questions, Cédric, or?
Yeah, I have time. I have about 10 more minutes if you guys have time to stay on.
Great. So I can see Anna has raised hand. She wants to ask a question. So guys, let's use this opportunity effectively. Those who have questions, just okay, Anna, please go ahead.
I would like to know, in business, is it good like to focus on only one thing or multiple things? Because sometimes I can be like mix everything, or sometimes I manage to do everything and I get tired a lot. I don't understand which one is the best.
Yep. So obviously every situation is a bit different and needs special consideration, but I think as a guiding principle, what I would say, once you know what you want to work on, make sure you create a plan and you ask yourself and you challenge yourself, what is the one thing that's going to be most important for you? So if you look, for example, at building apps, often founders tend to release their first app with way too many features. And that can kind of clouds the experience for the end user. Users are, if you have that one thing that you need to do really well, let's for example, talk about Instagram, right? They wanted to do really good photo sharing and they stayed away from photo resharing. They stayed away from just giving status updates for a very long time. They didn't do video, but they did photo sharing really, really well. And that's allowed them to grow so big and omnipresent as they are nowadays. So I would summarize it as, make sure you have one key initiative where you want to make a big step ahead in the next, for example, 90 days. And of course, keep things running. That's not to say stop paying invoices or all the admin stuff that comes in. But if there's one area where you need to like really step up, become twice as good or 10 times as good, make sure there's only one and you focus on that one.
Thank you, Anna, for the question, and thank you, Cédric. I can see many more questions are coming. One advice to you guys, go ahead and follow Cédric on social media, and you can ask him questions later on. on YouTube or on LinkedIn. Another question that we got is, so what are the steps in establishing a VC? How much should the initial capital be? What to avoid when choosing an investor, and how do you ideally manage your time? So many questions at a time.
Great questions, yeah, very important questions. So I'll try to remember all of them. So first one was, what are the steps to establishing a venture capital firm?
Yeah.
I think, and how much capital should there be? So I think I would say start small, start angel investing, write small tickets, see how you pick companies, write about it, let yourself be challenged by friends, but also by other venture capitalists and other angels. A good way to do this also is to take a job in a venture capital firm first. And then second, how much capital do you need? Typically, I would say it depends on the stage that you're investing in. I think the 20 million that we're investing right now is definitely at the lower end. I think an ideal amount to start with is something like 50 million. Because as soon as you manage other people's money, you want to make sure you are really diligent with your diversification. You got to make sure you invest in enough cases that you can be very sure that there's going to be 1 or 2 winners that will bring back all the capital and more, hopefully, for all the other cases that are going to fail. My assumption is always that out of 10 cases that we invest in, 7 are going to completely fail, 2 are going to pay us back our money, and then we have 1 that pays us back 20 to 50 times, and that's what's going to make the fund overall. So there's definitely a bit of diligence needed, and if you're just starting out, definitely start out as an angel or join an angel club where you can learn a lot of these basics and make all the mistakes at a small level, right? Like $5,000 checks. The second question was what to avoid when choosing an investor. The number one thing I would say is like choose relationship and personality over terms. It's always, I think, it's hard to turn down an offer that gives you a couple millions more in your valuation or a bigger check size. But if you have a bad feeling with that investor, don't go with it. I've personally made the mistake to join forces with a team that hasn't worked out. Even though from the beginning, I kind of knew that the team was not 100% right, but I felt like the market and the product were so good that it's still worth going into it. I realized over time that was definitely the wrong decision, and everyone that had told me before was right. So hopefully some of you don't need to make the same mistake firsthand. But that'd be my general advice. Go by your gut feeling and choose personality over terms. And then third, how do you ideally manage your time? Well, yeah, that's a big challenge for me because my calendar tends to completely overflow. And especially the last 5-6 weeks, I felt like I had very little time to think and strategize. And I spent all my time in execution, reacting to someone. And for certain periods of time, that's okay. But in general, the way I structure my time is the morning is mine. I tend to get up quite early and I keep the morning until noon open to myself, meaning I can work proactively on initiatives that I feel are very important for the future. And then I keep the afternoon and evening to work reactively, meaning I answer calls, I take meetings, and I go for dinners and lunches for people that want to catch up or discuss something.
Thank you, Cédric. And I guess the last question we will take today is, do you invest in early stage biotech startups?
I don't personally do. I unfortunately do not know anything about biotech except for what I read in the press. And so I try to stay away from that. But if there's someone here with an interesting idea, then feel free to reach out to me. You can find my email on my website, cedricwaldburger.com. And I'm more than happy to look at it and connect you with potential investors that I know in my network.
Thank you, Cédric. And with that, I would join all the comments in the chat, thanking you for the very interesting discussion. I think everyone benefited a lot from the meeting today. So thanks a lot. Good luck with all your initiatives. Good luck to Tomahawk.VC, and hope to hear more from you in a sense of your development and success.
No, thanks, Sam, a lot for organizing this. Thanks, Robert, as well. And thank you all for listening and spending your time with me. And if there's anything I can help with, feel free to reach out on all the channels.
Thank you so much, Cédric, for finding time in your very busy schedule, which is international indeed by its nature. You found out time to get to us, to Armenia. Thanks a lot. We really appreciate that.
Thank you. Likewise.
Thank
Have a good evening. Take care.
Cheers, guys. Be safe.
Cheers. Bye.